Imagine building a company with your own hands, starting from nothing, driven by an idea and the belief that you're creating something important. And then, one day, being told that you're no longer welcome in the company that carries your own last name. Not leaving by choice, but being pushed out. That is where Audi truly begins. August Horch was a German engineer born at a time when cars were barely more than an experiment. Most people trusted horses and saw machines as unreliable and unnecessary. Horch thought differently. He was obsessed with mechanics and constantly searching for ways to make vehicles faster, stronger, and more advanced than anything that existed at the time. Before founding his own company, Horch even worked for Carl Benz, the man widely regarded as the father of the automobile. There, he learned how innovation really worked, but also realized its limits. If he wanted to do things his own way, he would have to stand alone. In 1089, he founded Horch & Cie. The cars were well-built, expensive, and aimed at wealthy buyers. At first, the business showed promise. The problem was Horch himself. He was a brilliant engineer, but a terrible businessman. Instead of focusing on profit, he poured nearly all the money back into development new engines, new ideas, constant improvements. Investors wanted returns. Horch wanted perfection. Conflicts escalated, meetings turned hostile, and eventually everything collapsed. August Horch was forced out of the company that bore his name. For most people, that would have been the end. For Horch, it was only a pause. He immediately decided to start over and create a new company. But there was one obstacle. The court ruled that he could no longer use the name Horch, as it legally belonged to the old firm. That limitation led to a defining moment. The word Horch in German means listen. Someone close to him suggested translating it into Latin. The Latin word for listen is Audi. And just like that, a new name was born not as a branding trick, but out of necessity and defiance. Audi did not begin as a luxury brand. It began as a second chance. At the time, no one could have imagined that this name would one day stand alongside Mercedes and BMW. It was simply one man, stubborn and determined, refusing to accept defeat. And this was only the beginning. Much darker times, complete collapse, and an unexpected return still lay ahead. The name Audi quickly found its place, but the company itself was still far from stable. The early decades of the automotive industry were brutal. Economic crises came and went, competition was ruthless, and smaller manufacturers disappeared almost overnight. Audi alone did not have the strength to survive long-term in such conditions. By the early 1930s, Germany was deep in economic trouble. Inflation, unemployment, and uncertainty were everywhere. For car manufacturers, this meant one thing: adapt or disappear. In 1932, Audi joined forces with three other German companies: Horch, DKW, and Wanderer. Together, they formed a new alliance called Auto Union. This union was not created to build a beautiful image. It was created to stay alive. Each company brought something different. Horch focused on luxury vehicles. DKW specialized in small cars and motorcycles. Wanderer covered the middle class, and Audi sat somewhere in between, still searching for a clear identity. None of them were strong enough on their own, but together they stood a chance. That alliance was represented by a simple symbol: 4 interlinked rings. Each ring stood for one company. No hierarchy, no dominance, just a clear message that survival depended on unity. There was a deep irony behind that symbol. One of the rings represented Horch, the company August Horch had been forced out of, while another represented Audi, the name born from that very conflict, old and new, standing side by side in the same emblem. At the time, Audi was not the leading force within Auto Union. In fact, it was often overshadowed by the others. But the symbol itself would outlive every internal struggle. Long after companies disappeared and names were forgotten, the 4 rings would remain. Those rings were never meant to represent luxury or prestige. They were a reminder of crisis, compromise, and the necessity to work together when failure was only one step away. And that mindset, born from pressure rather than comfort, would shape Audi's approach for decades to come. But even unity was not enough to protect what was coming next. Auto Union's fragile stability did not last long. As Europe moved toward war, the automotive industry was pulled into something far darker. Civilian cars became irrelevant, factories were repurposed for military production, and engineering talent was redirected towards supporting the war effort. Audi, as part of Auto Union, was deeply embedded in this system. Production shifted to engines, military vehicles and equipment. Like many German industrial companies at the time, Auto Union relied on forced labor. Workers from occupied countries and prisoners were used under brutal conditions. It is an uncomfortable reality, but one that cannot be separated from this period. When the war ended, the destruction was overwhelming. All major Auto Union factories were heavily damaged or completely destroyed by Allied bombing. Machinery was reduced to rubble, supply chains collapsed, and thousands of workers were scattered. Even worse, most of Auto Union's key facilities were located in what became East Germany, now under Soviet control. These factories were seized, dismantled, and removed. What remained of Auto Union in the East effectively ceased to exist. For a time, the name Audi disappeared entirely. There were no cars, no factories, and no clear future. What survived was not a company, but a small group of former engineers and managers who fled to Ingolstadt in West Germany. They had no proper facilities, limited resources, and almost no capital. Survival, not ambition, became the goal. Instead of luxury or innovation, they focused on basic transportation. Small, inexpensive vehicles and motorcycles were produced under the DKW name. Audi was considered too heavy, a name too connected to the past and to a war Germany was trying to leave behind. At that moment, Audi stood on the edge of permanent disappearance. If circumstances had remained the same, the four rings would exist only in history books. But once again, survival depended on an unexpected turn. The turning point came from an unexpected direction. In the late 1950s, Volkswagen acquired Auto Union. At the time, this move had little to do with Audi itself. Volkswagen was interested in factories, production capacity, and engineering talent. Audi, as a brand, was almost an afterthought. For years, Auto Union continued producing vehicles mainly under the DKW name. These cars were simple, affordable, and practical, but they relied on outdated two-stroke engines. Then Volkswagen made a crucial decision. Two-stroke technology had no future. Development was halted entirely. That decision forced Auto Union to reinvent itself. Engineers began developing modern four-stroke engines, focusing on refinement and efficiency. In 1965, after years of absence, the name Audi returned. Not as a grand announcement, but quietly simply Audi, without numbers or slogans. It was a reset. Rather than chasing luxury like Mercedes or sportiness like BMW, Audi moved in a different direction. The focus shifted toward engineering, precision, and modern design. The idea was simple: offer cars that felt technically advanced, even if they were not the most emotional or prestigious. This approach slowly started to work. Models like the Audi 80 and Audi 100 gained attention for their clean design, solid construction, and intelligent layout. Audi was no longer just surviving, it was becoming relevant again. By the late 1970s, Audi still wasn't part of the elite, but it had something important: a clear direction. And with that direction came the innovation that would change everything. By the late 1970s, Audi had rebuilt itself, but it was still searching for something that would truly set it apart. Mercedes dominated luxury. BMW owned the idea of sporty driving. Audi needed an identity that was more than just being well-engineered. That identity arrived with a radical idea: all-wheel drive in a performance road car. At the time, four-wheel drive was associated with military vehicles, trucks, and off-road machines. It was heavy, complex, and considered unsuitable for everyday cars. Audi engineers saw it differently. While testing a military vehicle in winter conditions, they noticed something crucial: traction and stability that conventional cars simply couldn't match. In 1980, Audi introduced the Audi Quattro. It was bold, wide, and aggressive, and it immediately challenged everything the competition believed about performance. When the Quattro entered rally racing, the impact was instant and brutal. While rivals struggled for grip, the Audi simply powered through. Victories followed, but more importantly, perception changed. Audi was no longer just technically competent, it was dominant. Rather than keeping this technology limited to motorsport, Audi made a decisive move and brought Quattro into production vehicles. Everyday drivers could now experience superior traction, control, and confidence in all conditions. This wasn't marketing, it was something you could feel behind the wheel. For the first time, Audi had a defining advantage that competitors couldn't quickly copy. Quattro became more than a system, it became a core part of the brand's identity. Audi had reached its peak, but success also brought pressure. And the next challenge would not come from racing or engineering, it would come from inside the company itself. By the early 2010s, Audi was firmly established as a global premium brand. Its cars were known for technology, precision, and confidence. Diesel engines played a major role in that success, especially in Europe and the United States. They were marketed as powerful, efficient, and environmentally responsible. The problem was that reality didn't fully match the promise. To meet strict emissions regulations while maintaining performance and fuel economy, Audi along with the wider Volkswagen Group took a shortcut. Software was installed in the engine control systems that could detect when a vehicle was undergoing official emissions testing. Under those conditions, the engine switched into a special low emissions mode. Once the car returned to normal driving, that mode was disabled. On the road, emissions of nitrogen oxides were far higher than allowed. This wasn't a technical glitch or a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate decision to avoid costly engineering solutions that would have reduced profits and increased complexity. The scheme was exposed in 2015, triggering one of the largest scandals in automotive history. Investigations followed, sales were halted, vehicles were recalled, and fines reached into the billions. Executives resigned, and court cases stretched on for years. The financial damage was significant, but the real cost was trust. Audi's reputation had been built on the idea of technical superiority and intelligence. Dieselgate shattered that image. Customers felt misled, and the brand lost the moral authority it once claimed over its competitors. At the same time, new challenges emerged. Build quality was increasingly questioned, electronics became more complex and less reliable, and Audi struggled to define its position in a rapidly changing industry. Competitors adapted faster, and new players entered the market with bold ideas. Audi remained strong, but something fundamental had shifted. Today, Audi remains a powerful and recognizable brand. Its cars are still well built, technologically advanced, and visually refined. Interiors are among the best in the industry, and the overall sense of quality is unmistakable. From the outside, Audi appears stable and confident. Beneath the surface, however, the situation is more complex. The automotive world is changing faster than ever. Electrification, software, and autonomous technology are redefining what progress means. Audi has entered this space with models like the e-tron lineup, offering comfort, quality, and refinement. Yet these vehicles feel cautious rather than revolutionary. The role Audi once held, being the brand that pushed technology forward, has become harder to claim. Tesla reshaped expectations. New manufacturers, especially from China, move faster and take greater risks. Meanwhile, Audi often appears to follow trends instead of setting them. Another challenge lies in identity. Audi exists between two strong rivals. Mercedes leans into luxury and prestige. BMW emphasizes performance and driving dynamics. Audi attempts to balance both, while also presenting itself as a technology leader. That balance has become increasingly difficult to maintain. Despite this, Audi still possesses something invaluable: experience, engineering knowledge, and a legacy built on innovation. Quattro remains part of the brand's DNA, and decades of technical expertise cannot be erased by one scandal or one slow transition. The question is not whether Audi can survive. It can. The real question is whether it can lead again. In the past, Audi succeeded when it dared to challenge conventions and take risks others avoided. If it finds the courage to do so once more, the four rings will continue to stand for more than just premium design. If not, Audi may remain respected but no longer ahead.